Hi guys, it's me Terry from the Yarnjoy podcast. Welcome back to another crochet and crafting tips. I think this is video number 6. And as I've explained before, these tips are tips that I have received from viewers as an entry to a giveaway that I had a few weeks ago, and there were such great tips that were given that I wanted to share them with everyone if you didn't get a chance to read through them. So let's see. Today we're going to start with Brittany Morris, and she says, my tip is always get 2 skeins of yarn if you're not sure of what you're going to make quite yet. That way you'll know you'll have enough for a project, just in case the store or online place doesn't have it in stock if you run out. And that is very a good tip, or a very good tip. I usually always do that. I always will pick up 2, except the problem that I sometimes have is the fact that then I'll decide later that I want to make a blanket or a lap gown or something, and I should have not picked up 2, I should have picked up 4 or 5, you know. I always, for some reason, I always underestimate the amount of yarn that I need. But that is a good tip, to always pick up at least 2. That way you know that you would have enough, at least for a smaller project. But if you're like me, if you do make larger projects, then you may want to pick up more than 2. Okay, especially when they're on sale. Okay, thank you, Brittany. The next one is from Jennifer D, and she says, if you finish a project and you have leftover yarn, she uses the ball, well, she rolls her remaining yarn around the ball band. That way she'll know what that yarn, what brand of yarn and colorway and all that is. And I think what she's talking about is, I'm going to lean over here and see if I can find an example. Yes. Right here. Okay, so for this one, I have a ball winder, and so when I used this yarn, I wound up the remaining amount. I believe I used this for a hat, so I have quite a bit of it left over, but it obviously wasn't full skein, and so the skein was kind of floppy. So I went ahead and caked it up, and as I'm taking it off of the center piece of the yarn winder, the center core, I roll up I'm going to stick it up, I don't want to pull it all the way out, but I roll up the label and I stick that on top of the core, and then as I'm pulling the yarn off of the core, I push this label. I don't want to go back in. I push the label through there, and so that it'll be in the center. And so this is the label that tells me what yarn this is. And if you want to know, it's a pretty color. It is, I love this yarn. I believe it's what it is. And let's see if I see what, I think it's like a print. Yeah, I love this yarn print from Hobby Lobby. And well, I'm just going to pull it out. It is a Gean stripe. Anyway, I actually made a knit hat with this for my son, and it turned out the patterning turned out really nice. The only thing about these, I love this yarn prints, is when you crochet with them, the pattern doesn't always turn out like it does when you knit with them. And so, personally, I like it. When I use the print, I like to knit. When I do I love this yarn print. I like to knit because I like the pattern. It comes out better than when I crochet. It seems like it loses the pattern or something. I don't know. Anyway, that was way off tangent. Sorry. Let me close my door here. Okay, so. Yes, that is a good idea. When you're going to roll up your yarn, you can either use a ball winder like I showed you there, and put the label in the inside, or you can just wrap the yarn, roll up the label and wrap the yarn around it. I've even done that before. I have before I had a ball winder, I would fold up the label, and then I would just wrap my yarn into a ball, just hand wind it, but I would put that label, the label would be inside, and I would start wrapping the yarn around that label to make my ball. And so that's the way I used to do it before I got a ball winder. So, but yes, that's a good way to keep the ball band together with your leftover yarn where you still know what it is. Okay, the next tip comes from Pamela Crossman. I'm not sure if I pronounced it right. I think so, but if I didn't, I'm sorry, Pamela. But I'm trying to pronounce all these names. So anyway, she says that she's in. Let's see. She just is new. She just started crocheting, and she just said that her tip would be practice, practice, practice. She said, which is definitely true, of course, when you're learning to practice, practice, practice. But I mean, I have been crocheting for years and years and years, lots of years, and there's still things that I've learned, new things that I learned along the way, and you definitely need to practice. Yes, don't expect your work to look perfect from the beginning. I know I've had comments about a lot of my amigurumis, and they're asking me how I get the pieces sewed together so well. Well, I've been doing them for a while, and if you've seen my amigurumis, some of the first ones I've done, they were not good at all. You know, the pieces were terrible, and I used to think, oh, the pattern of the finished project looks so pretty, but when I make it, it just looks terrible, terrible and sloppy. Now, I feel like now I'm kind of getting a little better. I have a big collection back there. I'm getting a little better at sewing the pieces together, and a lot of that just comes with practice. So, and taking your time. I take my time when I'm sewing the pieces together, because if you get in a rush, if you're in a hurry and you get in a rush and you're trying to put the pieces together quickly, sometimes it will tell in your project. And so I always try to allow plenty of time for me to get it done, so then I can take my time in putting the pieces together, and they won't be as sloppy. But that just, like I said, it just comes with practice. So practice is definitely a good tip. Okay, the next one comes from Kendall Crochet, and she says, my tip is that for every project I start, I place a little paper sales tag. She says you get 100 with strings at Walmart for under $2. I think it's like a cardboard tag, I suppose, with a string where you can tie it onto something. But anyway, she says she uses that and she ties it onto her projects with the hook size, the pattern name, the yarn brand, and the color that she's using. So that is a very good tip. She said that way, if she lays down her project and she loses the hook, the information is still connected to it. So yes, that's a very good tip. We've gotten some really good tips about different ways that you can label your project, and to make sure you keep track of your hook size and the pattern, or even maybe where you found the pattern would be a good idea, because I have found patterns online, and I'm thinking, oh, I'll just keep that window open. My husband can attest, is that the word? But anyway, he can comment with that, because my laptop has always got multiple tabs open all the time. And he says, you have so many things running at one time. And it's like, well, it's like, I want to make sure I remember where that page is, because I want to look at it again. So, but it's very good, because you have a pattern and you think, oh my goodness, you want to do it, and maybe you might have even started it, and then you will forget what website it's on or where the pattern was, and you know, you may end up having to restart your computer or something, and it loses the tabs or whatever. But it's always good to keep track, and there's different ways so that you can do that. So whatever ways work best for you, then I say go for it. So that is good. So thank you, Kendall, for giving us this tip, because it's just another way that we can, another option that we can use to keep track of the hooks and things that we're using for our projects. Okay. The next tip comes from Rachel, and I'm afraid I will not say your name right, but I'm going to try. Rachel Bin6, maybe. Like I said, if I said it wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm you know, a lot of people mispronounce my last name. A lot. I've had lots of people pronounce it all different ways. So anyway, Rachel, thank you for writing and giving this comment. And your comment or tip is, my tip is to always keep a variety of yarn, colors and sizes on hand for any spontaneous project you would like to start. So yes, that is a good tip. And most people, most of us crafters, if we have been crafting for a while, we do have multiple sizes of different things. I don't always keep multiple colors. I have gotten better about buying things just to have some basic colors, not necessarily designated for a particular project. In the past, I've only bought yarn if I have a particular project in mind, and I still do that. But now, especially if there's a sale, I will try to go ahead and pick up some basic colors to always have on hand. So that is a good tip. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, the next one is from Teresa Little Trees Treasures. Okay, she says, be careful frogging projects. Not all yarn is easy to pull out, and you could damage your yarn so you're not able to reuse it. And that is definitely true. Some yarn you can rip things out, you know, frog if you want to call it that, with no problem, and just reuse it again. Others you may have to be careful. I know I have had some that it just seems like once you stitch with it, it's almost impossible. If you need to rip back several rows or rounds or whatever, it's almost impossible to take it apart again, because there's these little fibers, I guess, that once you crochet them together, they really like to latch on to each other. And sometimes it is very difficult to pull out your work, depending on the yarn that you're using, because they will really stick together. So yes, be careful, because sometimes if you pull too tight, you may start ripping yarn, or it breaks or whatever, and then you won't be able to use it again. So that's a good tip. Thank you. Okay, the next one is from Lisa Bradley, and she says, oh, she goes along with who was it? Pamela, that I just spoke about. She also says that to practice. She said practice makes perfect, and that was her tip. And so, as I was saying before, yes, practice does make perfect. Well, makes let's say practice makes better, and not to be frustrated in the beginning, you know, until you get some experience with it. Okay. So the next tip, comes from Kim. Hi, Kim. This is Blue Cherub 82, and she says her tip was to turn your work at the end of each round when you're making granny squares. I find that this helps keep the squares nice and even, and you don't get the slight warp you get when working around and around in the same direction. Now, I haven't tried that, but I do know, like, I think what she's talking about is like a granny square. So let's just say this one here. Okay, so if you keep going in one direction, especially now, this one is a very good one. Amanda made this for me. Thank you, Amanda. But I just want to show, because it's the granny square stitch, so I just want to show this. But when you're doing a granny square pattern, and if you're doing like a large granny square pattern, not small ones, I don't think you usually have that trouble with it. But if you're doing like a blanket size, doing granny stitch, sometimes the edges will get kind of wonky. And so Kim says that if you turn your work and go back the opposite direction with each round, that it'll keep the sides, all the sides, evened out, and it doesn't get that warping effect that you get when you just keep going around the same direction all the time. So now I've tried that. Well, I have tried, actually, I have made some squares that you do that. The pattern just called for you to change. And, but I haven't done it on a large size. So I think that would be a good tip to follow. So I'm going to try that the next time I make a granny square blanket size. So thank you, Kim, for giving us that tip. Okay. Let's see. The next one is from another Terry. This is Terry. It says Terry-TN, so I'm assuming that means Terry from Tennessee. So her tip is, let's see. She says to always write down the hook size and project that you're using and put them on a note or a piece of paper, notepad, or post-it note, whatever, and you put it in the bag that holds the project. That way you can know what the hook size is that you're using for that project. So definitely that's just showing, that's a good tip. That's showing you another option you have as far as labeling your work, or at least putting it in the bag where the project is, to remember what hook size you are using and where the pattern is that you're using for that. And even the yarn and colorway as well, because if it's a project that you maybe put aside for months at a time, come back and you may forget what yarn that is if you don't have the ball bands anymore. You know, you'd think, oh, is that Red Heart, or is that I Love This Yarn? You know, sometimes you can kind of tell by feeling, but sometimes you can't. So good tip. Okay, the next one comes from Rose. This is Rose from the Philippines. Her channel name is, I think it is CD Aki, but I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. But this is Rose from the Philippines. And she says, my tip is, if you ever don't have a tapestry needle, you can hide in your stragglers by hooking them inside the stitches. And I think she's talking about that as you're crocheting, that you can crochet over the tails as you're going along, to try to minimize the amount of stragglers that you have to weave in, or the tails that you have to weave in later. So yes, that's a good tip. I do try to do that. Or sometimes I'll partially do that, and then I'll have a little tail sticking out, just a small amount, and then I'll come back later and just weave in that tail just the rest of the way. But I do start out with working over quite a bit of it, if not all of it, with my stitches as I'm stitching the next row. So that's a good tip. Okay, the next one is from Maria Davidson, and she says, she says, my tip is, so I don't lose my yarn needles, I made a little crochet pin cushion just for my yarn needles. And that's a good idea. I believe possibly, no, that was who was it? Recently, yes, recently I saw Karen of Happiness is Homemade. Is that what her name is? I'm sorry if that's not the channel. I think that's what it is. And anyway, she had been making needle keepers that she crocheted, little pouches that she can put her needles in. So that's a similar idea. And so thanks, Maria, for giving us that tip to make a little pin cushion to keep your specifically your yarn needles in. So that's good. I'm always losing my yarn needles. I have several containers with yarn needles because I'm always, seems like I've got them in projects, or I've got them here and there and yonder. So that's a good idea. Okay, the next tip comes from, let's see, Gypsy Rose. Sorry. My tip is to make something for yourself every now and then. No one will appreciate the gift more than yourself. That's true. Sometimes I'll forget that. I'm so busy making things for others, and I'm sure we all are that way, that sometimes you just gotta pick out something and make it for yourself. So yes, that's a good tip. Don't forget to treat yourself. Treat yourself. Isn't that what they say? I heard somebody, I guess it's from some TV show maybe, I don't know, but I've heard people say that. Okay, let's see, the next tip is from Sylvia Barnes, And she says, my tip is if you don't know how to do the standing stitch or invisible join, please learn, because it makes your work so much neater. And I do agree, especially with the invisible join. I admit I have not tried the standing stitch. I need to, and I think I mentioned this in one of my earlier tip videos, both of these stitches, and I will go back to that episode where I linked a couple of tutorial videos, not that I did, but some that I found that explains how to do those stitches, because I think that they would be good idea to learn them. So I will find them and I will link them below in the description box again, so that way y'all can find them as well. So thank you, Sylvia, that's a good tip. Okay, the next one is Annalisa Marks, and she says, my tip is using a plastic bag with a zipper makes a great inexpensive yarn bowl. So yes, I agree. I have used all kinds of things as a yarn bowl or a yarn container, especially if it's a yarn that is very I can't think of the word I'm wanting to use, but it attracts lots of fuzz. It's like a fuzz magnet, there's the word. And it's very good to keep it like in a plastic bag, even with a zipper or something like that. Not necessarily zip, but like the Ziploc, because you can partly close it, and then that way only the yarn strand is feeding through, and then the rest is protected from picking up all kinds of lint and dust and that sort of stuff. So yes, that's a good tip. Thank you, Annalisa. Okay. The next one is from Cindy Suttles. Hi, Cindy. And she says, the only tip I might have is for those of us that have older eyes and may not be able to thread a needle to weave in our ends. Buy the wool needles that look like tiny knitting needles, but they have a little loop on the end. I have found these are wonderful, and I don't spend several minutes trying to thread a tapestry needle or smaller. So I understand that because I guess the last couple of years I've had to graduate to bifocals, which I wasn't happy about, but I do understand that. In fact, I do have a couple of the wool needles. What was a set of 3? I'll show you the big one so it'll be easy to see. But see, you need to see it on something dark. Let's see. Here. See the loop on the end there? And it is flexible. And so it is very good at getting the needle in, because that's a very big loop. I'm not needle, threading the yarn through. It also helps if the yarn tail is very short, because you can use the needle and weave it in and out underneath the threads you're wanting to weave your yarn tail into, and then stick the yarn tail through that little loop and pull it the rest of the way through. Now, I admit that these, I haven't practiced enough with these because it's new, it's kind of a new type yarn needle that I need to practice with it more, but I do definitely like the way it's flexible, and it's very easy, because I know, besides threading it, because I do have some other ones that have big eyes that I can use to thread my yarn through, but the fact that these are flexible, it really helps to pull it through, because sometimes I really have to sometimes I really have to grip the needle so hard, and sometimes I think, oh, I need a pair of pliers to pull it through to get that yarn through the stitches I want. And this, the eyes are flexible, and so they will collapse down, and then it's very easy to pull the yarn through what you're weaving the tails through. So yes, that's a good tip. Okay. Oh, and they do actually make yarn threaders, just like the needle threaders for small. needles. They do actually make needle threader. Let's see if I have one. Oh, I have one. Usually I can't find it, but I happen to have it here so that I can show you, I think. Yes, here it is. Let's see. Got something clipped onto it. There it is. And it works just like a needle threader, but it goes through the bigger eyes of the yarn, of the yarn needles. And so this does work pretty well. So, but I like the way, of course, this is just all in one. The needle's got the big eye to it, and you don't need to keep up with the yarn threader because sometimes I can't find it. Okay, so that's a good tip. Thanks, Cindy. Okay, so the next tip, let's see, let's do 2 more and then I'll let you go for today. So the next tip is Sheila Kimbrell, and she says, my tip, if you're making a really long starting chain, put a stitch marker every 10 or 20 stitches. That way, if you get interrupted, you don't have to count all the stitches to know where you are when you start back on the work. So yes, that's good. That tip can also work when you're working on a project and you're having to count rows. If you're doing repeats and you're having to count rows, so same thing if you're trying to chain and you're having to chain a large like 220 or whatever, that way you don't have to recount all the time if you need to make sure everything's coming out right. But also, like for instance, the scarf that I'm working on right now, I have to do a repeat. I'll show it tomorrow on my episode, but it is has a 2-row repeat, and so you have to like repeat rows 3 and 4 until you get to like row 90 or something like that. It's an infinity scarf, so you do that much and then you join it together, so it'd be an infinity scarf. And so this morning I just started counting. I just started stitching it, and I've been stitching it for quite a while, and I was thinking, oh, it's getting pretty big. I want to count and see how, I don't know if I've got to row 90 or not, because it's just a repeat, so I've just been working on it just mindlessly, I guess. And so I counted, and then I marked where I counted, so then I won't have to count it again, in other words. So, in fact, I'm on almost row 70, I think, so I've got about 20 more rows to go. But I went ahead and put a little stitch marker is what I'm holding, right there, so I don't have to go back to row 1 again and count up to 75 and then go back to row 1 and count up to whatever, the next time I want to count it. So that's a good tip. Thank you, Sheila. Okay, last one for this video is this is from Crystalline Sky, and she says, my tip is due to my daughter. She has me working on a backpack in black, and since acrylic stretches, I have added a strand of cotton to it using 2 strands of yarn and one of Aunt Lydia's number 10 cotton. That is the crochet thread. Let me grab one right quick. I had to go get it. It was in a drawer in my closet. But I have a whole drawer full of this because I used to do doilies quite a bit, and I haven't. But I do still use it occasionally. But anyway, it's the ones that come in these cones like that. This is a number 10, so it's very thin. Anyway, she says she uses a strand of this, whatever color she's using, along with her acrylic yarn. And she said that way it helps it not to be as stretchy. It kind of gives it a little firmness to it, I guess, or what would you call that? Resistance, maybe, to keep it from stretching, because this stuff, of course, does not stretch. I mean, it's just... But that's a great tip. I haven't thought of you doing that, but I really like that. So I'm thinking that would work really well on, that idea would work really well on purse handles, because you know how you make purse handles. Well, I don't have one where I've made the handle within reach right now, but this is nylon, so that wouldn't work. But you know, the purse handles, if you do a crochet stitch to make your handles, then especially like on a market bag or something like that, unless you reinforce that handle with some fabric underneath it or something, it stretches quite a bit, and then of course that will make your bag misshapen, or not misshapen, but just really stretched out long. And I had never thought about that, but she says, see, she uses some of the crochet thread, and you just would you would just match it with what color you're using, and then hold that along with your acrylic, and that would cut down on the stretch of that strap. So I'm definitely going to use that tip. Thank you, Crystalline. I think that's a great tip. I don't know why I hadn't thought of that, but I haven't. But I think that's a great idea. I really like that. So anyway, I'm going to quit there. I have quite a few more, so I will be making more of these videos. I will make a notation of where I stopped at, so that way I'll know where to start on the next one. So I guess that's it, guys. Tomorrow, today's Wednesday, tomorrow's Thursday, so I'll be filming the next episode of the Yarnjoy podcast, and I believe that will be episode 64. And I will be filming that tomorrow, and show you what all the things I got done this past week. If you're over on my Facebook page, and if you're not, why aren't you? Come on over and join the group. But anyway, it's just called Yarnjoy Podcast over on Facebook. If you are on there, you noted that I had posted a status, I guess, that our AC had gone out. Oh, it was terrible for about 2.5 days, I suppose. No AC, no air conditioning. And of course, here in the States, it is summer. I know some of my viewers that are from Australia. Hi, Lee. It is the winter for you, but here it is the summer, and I am in the States, and we use Fahrenheit instead of Celsius, but it was like 100 degrees, not in the house. Luckily, it wasn't 100 degrees in the house, but it was outside, and upper 90s to 100, and so it made for some really hot days. And my craft room, this room, is extra hot. It seems like one of the hotter rooms of the house, and so I couldn't bear to be in here. And so there was a few videos that I was wanting to make, and I'm just now getting back into doing it after a few days of not being able to because of the heat. But thankfully, we were able to, we had to get a new AC unit, and so got that straightened out. And so much cooler this morning. I told my husband, I woke up and it was cool in the house. I was thinking it was fall. So much better. Not good to be without AC. And what's funny is when I was a child, I grew up in a little house that had no air conditioning until I was in 6th grade, so around 12 maybe. Is that right? Sound right? And we had no air conditioning. And then when I was in 6th grade, or turned 12, we moved into another house, and that house had air conditioning. But when I grew up, before then, I was in a little house that had no air conditioning. We didn't have ceiling fans. I think we had a few box fans, you know, the little stand on the floor kind. That's it. I think maybe we had a window unit, if I remember, after a fashion. But anyway, I don't remember it being as hot as it is these days. I don't know, it's weird. Either that or we could just, being a child, we could tolerate more. Maybe that's why. But anyway, I'm rambling. But that's what's been happening to me this week, is no AC for a few days, and then getting it replaced and having work people here replacing it, and now everything kind of get back to a kind of a regular routine, maybe for a little bit. But anyway, that's all, folks. I'm just rambling. So come back tomorrow, or look for my episode tomorrow, my new episode I will be releasing. Thank you for my subscribers. Thank you for my new subscribers. I have reached 1,500, or I've reached the 1,500 mark. I've gone a little over now of my subscriptions, and so that means I will be doing another pattern giveaway. So stay tuned for that. So, and if you haven't subscribed, please do, and join in the group on Facebook, and check back and follow me along on my projects and all the other videos I do, or the ones I do. I've been doing a few extra ones here and there, so but thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and I hope everybody's having a great week, and I will see you again tomorrow for my regular episode. So take care, guys. Bye.